My buddy Jason gave me a call the other day and told me that he found a 1970 Chevelle Super Sport, which could have been one of three things: a 396, an LS5 454, or an LS6 454. They didn't make the small block Super Sports in the Chevelle in 1970. And that's the goal for this video. By the end of it, you should be able to tell whether you have a Chevelle at home or in somebody's backyard, whether it's a LS6 454, LS5 454, or a 396. This car behind us needs total restoration, but we'll find out what it truly is. Speaking of restoration, today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp. With BetterHelp, you can have access to a licensed therapist who can provide you with helpful, unbiased advice if your mental health is suffering. Starting therapy can be a challenge, with many finding it difficult to connect with someone in their area with experience with face-to-face communication. Since everyone has a different need, BetterHelp provides you with a questionnaire that'll match you with the best therapist. The therapist that they pick for you will have tons of experience in dealing with whatever you could possibly be going through. Every single therapist is licensed and has either a master's or a doctorate degree and has spent over 3 years and thousands of hours working with people just like you. And if you ever need to switch with a therapist for whatever reason, BetterHelp makes it easy with no cost or no worry. If you think therapy is for you, you can join the over 4 million people who have accessed BetterHelp by using my link betterhelp.com/backyardbarnfinds, or choose the Backyard Barn Finds during sign up for a special discount off your first month of therapy. Thank you for BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. Now, as you can see, this car is extremely rough, and I want to give you an overview of it before we kind of decode the car so you know what we're starting with. This car does not have any interior in it, but one thing on the front of the Super Sport cars is that they all got clear lights just like this. If this was a non-Super Sport 70 Chevelle, these would be amber colored, so that's a good sign. It also does have a cow hood on it, and the cow hood was optional. It wasn't something that was standard on the 454 cars or the big block 396 cars. What's also cool is the cow hood got the hood pins. This had just a regular bulge hood. The hood pins were not available, and you had to get those from the dealer. As you can see on the inside here, really not a whole lot to work with, and I'll break down everything on the interior here in just a moment, but I want to show you guys that there is no possible way that we're going to be able to find a build sheet for this car. This car is an Atlanta built car, and the build sheets would have been either in the driver or the passenger side door panel, but it's completely stripped. So what we do have to do is take a look at the cow tag. Before we look at the cow tag, we have to understand what engine options were available in 1970 for the Super Sport. So basically they're built into two different categories. The first one would be the Z25, which would be the 396. There were two 396s available. There was a 350 horse L34 car, and there was also a L78 396 375 horse car. Secondly, there was a Z15 option, which consisted of the LS5 and the LS6. Those options were not available until about November or early December in 1970, and they actually replaced the L78. But those are very important, and those are the engines that could have came in this car. If we take a look at the cow tag, the first box says 1970, because it is a 70 Chevelle. Then we have 13637, which would be a Malibu two-door hardtop. We have A for the Atlanta factory, and that's very important on this car because it has certain things on it that are specific to the Atlanta factory, like this solenoid right here for the cow induction hood. We do have 756, and that would be the black bucket seats. So we'll check and see if this car had bucket seats. It does have B80 and B90 for the trim basically that would go around the windows on the outside. You can kind of see it still right here. Also, we do have 7575, and that is cranberry red. And it's good because we see there is red here on the cow, and everywhere you look, this car does look to be a cranberry red car. Last piece of important information on this cow tag would be O2A. That means this car was built in February, which is the second month, and A, which is the first week. And that's going to be extremely important for this car. So the first thing that we want to do to confirm that this is a real Super Sport car, just to find out what we're working with in general, is to actually look at the rear end. We can learn a lot about this car from the rear end, and I'll show you here that this car has boxed lower control arms. The actual control arm itself here on the rear, underneath, they're boxed, meaning that there are plates welded in here so that this control arm doesn't collapse under all the horsepower from the Super Sport. Now these cars would have had a F40 suspension, eventually switching over to the F41, which either way they would have had the rear sway bar that went underneath and connected there, and that's why those control arms are boxed, something that was standard and required if you have a 1970 Super Sport Chevelle. Now this rear end for this car is a 12 bolt. We can see the bottom holes here and the top holes here. However, this 12 bolt is out of a 1971 Chevelle, so it is not correct for this car. In order for it to be correct for a Super Sport LS5, LS6, it would have CRV or CRU, which would be the posi and the non-posi rear ends for this car. If it was posi, of course, it would have had a little red tag on it, and it would also have a sticker here, which I don't see. I'm not really seeing any of the glue on this side, so I'm not sure if it would have been posi or not. Of course, this deck lid has been repainted also. Most Super Sport cars had the stripes. Now this car does have a cowl induction hood, and when you got the cowl induction hood, the stripes came standard. You could have ordered a Super Sport Chevelle without stripes, and you could have also got the cowl induction hood and asked for the stripes to be deleted. However, this car does have stripes on it. The stripes are different depending on when the car was built and what plant it was built at. Now, the stripes are very important because they lead us to the cowl hood, and there's a lot of important stuff that we can learn from the cowl hood on this car. There was a couple different versions of the cowl hood on a Chevelle. Now this is the later version. I believe they switched over sometime in about March or April of 1970. This car was built in February, so this hood would not go to this car, and I'll show you that right now. If we take a look right here where the intake is, and I don't want the hood to slip over, but do you see this little dash line right here? That is called a crumple zone. And the early Chevelle cowl induction hoods don't have that crumple zone. So this car would have had a cowl hood, and that piece right there would have been completely flat. It wouldn't have the lines that go across it just like this. Also, the triangles are a little bit different, and there's a couple other things to show you on this cowl hood. But what I really want to show is the actual firewall itself. It's important that this is an Atlanta built car, because these holes would be in different locations if it was a different facility. If we take a step back and we look at the firewall and we look in this location right here, we can see that it has a hole here and here. This hole right here would be for the ZL2 cowl induction cables basically. And then this hole right here, second to it, would be the kickdown harness for the pedal on the inside, and we'll show you that here in just a moment. And then there's a dimple right here that's not drilled out, and that would have been for the U14 gauges. So this car did not have gauges in it, just had the regular Super Sport dash. What's also specific to an Atlanta is this solenoid right here being in this position. If this was like a Baltimore car or a Kansas City car, they would be found in different locations. Also, if this was a Kansas City car, you can see the dimple in the firewall right here. That dimple right here would be cut out for the ZL2 cowl hood if it was found in Kansas City. This is an Atlanta built car, so this front section is correct. It also has the correct steering for a big block car. It also has the F41 front sway bar, which were found on the big block car's F41 suspension package as well. Before we get back to the actual engine compartment of this car, I want to go ahead and talk about the interior. I want to show you that this car did have bucket seats. Right here we have the bracket for the bucket seat. You can see that most of the interior is gone. The most important part we can find though is the dash. Now this is a dash that's been assembled by several different pieces. This over here is not 70. This would be 70 correct in through here. And the Super Sport's got the circle style gauges just like this. I can tell this is an original 1970 dash because all other reproduction dashes you can see on this little circle right here, those would be painted silver on the aftermarket pieces, so that is original 1970. Now, this car was built in Atlanta, and if it was a LS5 car, they actually had an error in the tax from Atlanta. The LS5 cars would have only been attacked at 5,000 because of computer error up until April of 1970. The LS6 cars, of course, would have got the 6,500 RPM tack, the correct one, but the LS5's got the same as a small block. We can confirm that this was a turbo 400 car with the kickdown harness because the solenoids are still there. And so if we look at the gas pedal, okay, and if we look up, basically what that is that is the solenoid, so that if the car reaches up to the certain speed that you want, that the flapper opens to allow the cold air into the cow induction. In October of 1969, GM actually sent a letter to the dealers and said that they were going to no longer produce the L78 cars, which is the 375 horsepower versions. They were going to be replaced by the LS6, which had 450 horsepower, which is more than any other car that Chevrolet produced that year. They also were replaced with LS5s. There's a difference between an LS6 and an LS5. The LS6 is a solid lifter cam, and the LS5 is a hydraulic lifter cam. And what makes a difference is the fuel lines that go to both of those motors. So this car was built in 02A, which is the first week in February. They started making LS6 Chevelles, and basically the first one that I know of is November 19th. And the last L78 car that I know of was built sometime in December. So this car was built in February. And why that's important is because this car has a single fuel line, 3/8 fuel line, and it's never been removed. It runs the whole way back to the car, to the back. And what that tells me is that the car that we're taking a look at is a 1970 cranberry red LS6 Chevelle. We don't have a build sheet for it. We don't have an original anything for it as far as paperwork goes. But if we follow the clues on the car tells us that it's a single fuel line, February built, 1970 LS6 Chevelle. There are other known Chevelles from Atlanta that were built after this car that have a single fuel line. In March, from Atlanta is when they switched to 2 fuel lines on the LS6. You could get a double fuel line LS6 car late in the run in 1970, but this car meets all the criteria for an LS6 single fuel line in 70. So I want to show you that this car has the fuel line. It's never been removed. It goes the whole way back. The single fuel line the whole way back. And of course this right here is the parking brake cable.
Hey Parker, did you get a
Jason.
chance to look at the vehicle over?
I did.
What is your professional opinion?
Well, Jason, in my opinion, you have a very, very, very interesting car here, and this car does say 454 on the fenders right here, and I believe that this was an LS6 454 car, and I'll show you why. The reason I think that, in the audience we've talked about this, is because you still have the single fuel line here. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is a February built car, and I do know of LS6 cars that were built at the end of February that have a single fuel line on it.
Nice.
That are still LS6. They're proven cars. And so even though we don't have an engine, we don't have a transmission, the car is basically, looks like you pulled it out of a junkyard. Where did you get this thing at?
Actually, it came from a junkyard.
Oh, it did?
Yes, in Virginia. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And I think you told me you were able to pick this car up pretty cheap. The guy didn't know what it was or something like that?
Well, he knew it was a super sport.
Okay.
He didn't know what it was as far as a L34 or LS5 or an LS6. I happened to zoom the cameras in on the pictures he sent me, and I noticed it had a single fuel line. And I've always been a guru with the 70 Chevelles. It's my favorite vehicle, favorite year.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, to a lot of the people at home, to the untrained eye, it doesn't look like that there was much here, but this car does have the pieces on it that you would need still to confirm that it was a big block Super Sport LS6 car from Atlanta.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so you have a pretty good car, and it's cranberry red, which I think is pretty cool.
Thank you.
Awesome, awesome, Jason. If you guys like this car or found value in this video or learned anything about Chevelles, give us a thumbs up or a like on this video. Again, my name is Parker with Backyard Barn Finds, and have a great day.